Adaram say, whenever I leave the house, and on whatever thing my eyes fall on, صبر. Allah Ta'ala says, Wallahu yuhibbu as-sabirin. Allah Ta'ala is lief with Adikina.
School governing body of South Coast Madrasa.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the studios. Today we have in studio with us a very esteemed guest, someone who's occupied much of the media spotlight in the last few days. But alhamdulillah, lots to learn from him. We welcome to the studio Muhammad Desai, the National Coordinator for BDS, Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions, South Africa. Welcome to ITV Studios.
Jazakallah for having me.
Brother Muhammad, well, everyone's heard this. It's a buzzword. People are wearing it on their T-shirts. They have bumper stickers on their cars, little, bracelets on their arms, all saying BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions. But inshallah, today gives us the opportunity of being able to unpack that and give a true explanation of what it is, what it entails, what its impact is, what the consequences of being part of this campaign are. So let's start right at the beginning. Boycott, divestment, sanctions as a means of showing support for certain things and showing protest against other things. Where did this concept originate?
Well, we look at those pictures on our TV screens, we get them in our emails, on our WhatsApp groups, those tragic photos of children being killed in the Gaza Strip, of families being wiped off the face of this earth. And the question to many of us is, what can I do? How can I contribute? How can I stop this? And the answer to that is BDS. The three most important letters that have come out of the Palestinian struggle in the last decade. Now, how did we get to BDS? Well, one of the most significant events to have taken place for Palestinian solidarity took place in 2004. And that is that the International Court of Justice, the highest court on this earth, pronounced that the Israeli wall that is being built, as well as the associated regime, are in contravention of international law. But the ICJ went even further, saying that no member state should lend any sort of support to the construction of the wall and its associated regime. Palestinians in many ways thought that this is now the time in which the international community is going to intervene decisively in their struggle. However, unfortunately, 1 year later, no country had moved. And so Palestinians themselves then took the issue into their own hands. And in 2005, exactly 1 year later, Palestinians gathered in Ramallah, and in the largest grouping of Palestinian civil society to date. We're talking about a gathering of Palestinian trade unions, youth organizations, women's groups, the national and Islamic forces, all gathering in Ramallah and issuing a call for a program of boycott, divestment, and sanctions, BDS. Now, my father's generation, generations before that, held a principal boycott against Israel. However, the issuing of this call by the Palestinians shifted the boycott from a principal boycott into a strategic and political campaign to hold Israel accountable. And how did the Palestinians do this? Well, they set out three demands. The first demand was for the Palestinian citizens of Israel to full equality. The second demand was for Israel to end its occupation of the West Bank and the rest of the occupied Palestinian territories. The third demand was for Israel to respect the right of return of Palestinian refugees. All three demands firmly entrenched in international law, nothing radical or militant for Israel not to be able to meet.
Brother Muhammad, you mentioned your dad's generation or your parents' generation calling for a principal boycott. What are some of the contrasts between a principal boycott and a strategic and focused boycott?
Well, the principal boycott produced many lists, for example, of about 50, 60, 70 different international companies that had subsidiaries, that had another subsidiary, that had another subsidiary that may have been that may have had a footprint in Israel. And this way of boycotting can be very exhausting. It can be very tiring, and you can feel as if you're not getting anywhere. And so what the BDS movement has done is the BDS movement has asked members of the international community to rather focus in, zoom in, strategize around certain campaigns, reach certain goals, reach certain victories, and go from one campaign to another. It's really built on the experience of the South African anti-apartheid movement. The one difference, however, is that the kind of victories that we've seen in the last 9 years that the BDS movement has been around far surpasses probably the first 20 years of the South African boycott. The Palestinian boycott of Israel is moving at a supersonic speed. Israel itself is feeling the pinch, is feeling the pressure at its highest levels. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, for example, convened a meeting of his entire cabinet, and the agenda was how do we counter the growing BDS movement across the globe.
Let's look at these last 9 years of the existence of boycott, divestment and sanctions, coupled to this largest gathering of Palestinians in Ramallah. What are some of the milestones and the victories that this particular campaign, having been called for by the Palestinians, has celebrated to date?
Well, you have various Dutch pension funds, Swedish pension funds, Norwegian pension funds that have all divested from Israel. You have Israel's largest exporter of fresh produce, called Grexco, going into bankruptcy. You have a very popular Israeli fizzy drink called SodaStream, which has dropped on the Nasdaq stock exchange by 14% as of January 2014. You have the University of Johannesburg, locally in South Africa, terminating its relations with Israel. You have an agricultural company called Carsten Farms that, after an almost 3-year campaign demanding that Carsten Farms terminate its relationship with Israel, Carsten Farms gave BDS South Africa a legal commitment that not only will it terminate its relationship with the current Israeli company, but that it will also not enter into any future relations with Israeli settlement companies. You have, in addition to that, various celebrities, musicians, actors, actresses, all coming out pledging their support for the BDS movement, from Madonna to Danny Glover, all beginning to speak out on this issue, some more clearer than others, but you do see a growing movement within the arts world and within the academy. You see, for example, almost on a monthly basis, you have university structures across the USA and Europe adopting certain boycott of Israel resolutions.
So we have this as opinion makers and trendsetters, setting the trend for many people to follow. The average consumer, however, gets inundated with these lists that you've mentioned, part of, the continuation of a principled boycott. The average consumer also wants to know how is it that BDS as a movement goes about in terms of choosing the specific target companies or institutions or multinationals that it wants to take down. Maybe you could give us some idea into that process.
Well, firstly, we're urging members of the community, members of the public, join us in what is probably one of the most fashionable international movements of our time. Really, being part of the BDS movement today is being on the right side of history. Your children, your grandchildren are going to ask you, where were you during the Palestinian Solidarity Movement and during the BDS campaign to isolate Israel? It's a very inspiring and it's a very motivating campaign because it's goal-orientated, because we can see our victories, because we can see Israel being isolated on the international stage. But how do ordinary consumers participate in this campaign? Well, the first trick is that we're urging people to become conscious consumers. Demand to know where that avocado, where that tomato, or where that pretzel is coming from. Demand to know the country of origin, and every store is under legal obligation under the Consumer Protection Act to provide the country of origin. So become a conscious consumer. But then, secondly, join active BDS campaigns that are currently being run. Now, BDS South Africa as an organization has endorsed and is running 3 consumer boycott campaigns. The first boycott campaign is currently against Woolworths stores. Woolworths brings in fresh produce from Israel, and the majority of Israeli agricultural companies have some sort of footprint in the illegal Israeli settlement enterprise. And so it's very likely that the fruits that are coming in to South Africa from Israel are actually from companies that are based or have operations in the settlements. So we've called for a complete boycott after much consideration, after much strategy, and after much analysis. We've called for a complete boycott of Woolworths stores, and we're asking the community to bring both. Bring your consumer power, bring your consumer weight to this issue by withdrawing support from Woolworths, but also be creative. Write letters to the managers, demand a meeting with your local Woolworths store, organize protests and pickets together with others in your community. For the younger generation, take to social media, go onto Twitter, go onto Facebook, demand answers from Woolworths. We are convinced that we will bring Woolworths to the table. We will bring Woolworths to the point where it has to give up that 0.1% of Israeli fresh produce from its stores.
So this is one of the first boycotts that boycott, divestment and sanctions have been calling for. Naturally, as Brother Muhammad has mentioned to us, it's your conscience that inspires a consciousness and conscientizes you to be on the right side of history, as Muhammad says it. Stay with us. When we return from this break, inshallah, we'll look into the other 2 boycotts that boycott, divestment and sanctions South Africa are calling for, and much more from Muhammad.
صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما صلوا عليه.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, we're in studio with Muhammad Desai, National Coordinator for Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions, BDS, South Africa. Before the break, we were discussing one of 3 boycotts that BDS South Africa has been championing, and that's the boycott against Woolworths. Muhammad, we mentioned that we would be sharing with the viewers the 2 other boycotts that BDS is championing. Which 2 are these?
Well, 2 other consumer boycotts. We also run various other BDS campaigns, which I'll get to in a second. But the second consumer boycott that we run is against a company called SodaStream. Now, SodaStream is not only an Israeli company, but it's also an Israeli settlement company. And this is a company that it's a fizzy drink machine with a liquid. You take it home and you can make carbonated fizzy drinks. So this product, whilst you yourself may not be buying it, whilst you yourself may not be purchasing this product, we are calling on members of the community to go through to the stores that they use, be it a Game, Macro, Checkers, Spar, and so on, that go through to these stores and ensure that those stores remove the SodaStream products. And SodaStream is a campaign that has taken off internationally with various victories from the UK through to the USA. But beyond SodaStream and this settlement company, the third campaign, which is gaining a lot of traction internationally but also in South Africa, is a campaign against a security company called G4S Security. Now, G4S Security runs Israel's prison systems, its detention facilities, and its torture houses. And it's an international company, although it has this subsidiary in Israel that is carrying out these that is collaborating with the Israeli regime. Now, G4S, because of this complicity, Palestinian prisoners and Palestinian political prisoner associations call for a boycott of the company since 2011. The G4S campaign is really moving at a speed which we can't keep up with. You have, for example, just last month, the Methodist Church divesting completely from G4S. You have the world's richest person, Bill Gates, taking out his entire 2 billion rand stake from G4S after BDS South Africa, together with other organizations, engaged with the Bill Gates Foundation. And so these are 3 practical consumer boycott campaigns that you as an ordinary person out there can be part of, and can be part of the BDS movement.
Mohammed, I see something in terms of the last two you've mentioned, SodaStream and G4S. In fact, even the first one, Woolies, that is not only associated with what the individual consumer consumes per se themselves, but it's about creating an awareness and a hype against what those particular targeted companies are supporting, which means that even if you don't personally, have enlist the services of G4S as your private security company, but the shopping center that you use, or the bank that you use, or any other facility in your community or society uses G4S, then to raise some sort of awareness around that and tell them that this is not on and unacceptable. I guess in the case of G4S, from a South African perspective, in terms of the violation of rights of certain South African prisoners at South African prison facilities, G4S was complicit there too. So all the more reason for us as South Africans, to be boycotting G4S as supporters of BDS. You mentioned that consumer boycotts are one aspect of the work and the campaigns that BDS runs. What are some of the other campaigns?
Well, we also run legal campaigns. For example, we're looking into a South African company called Cape Gate. This is a local company that produces the cement and produces the wire which gets sent through to Israel for the construction of Israel's apartheid wall. So we're investigating using legal mechanisms as to how we can hold Cape Gate accountable for its contribution to the Israeli apartheid wall, which is a violation of international law. So we do have various legal campaigns that we run, but also public awareness raising campaigns. For example, BDS South Africa took out various billboards with the 3 maps of Palestine, clearly showing the growing Israeli colonization of Palestinian lands graphically. And we took out these billboards in areas in which we didn't have the usual and traditional support base, because this movement really, if it has to have an impact, it has to be as wide as possible, and it has to have the largest amount of support on the ground from every South African of every country, of every city and town. So we took out these billboards across the country. They were large, they cost a lot of money. However, the kind of response that we got from members of the community wanting to find out more, wanting to participate in the campaign, really showed that this was a beneficial campaign to have run. However, we did get into hot water with the South African Jewish Board of Deputies and the South African Zionist Federation putting pressure on one of the billboard companies to remove our billboard. And so we've now been in a court battle with this company, with this billboard company, for the last 1.5 years. But we do hope to win this issue in the courts, because one of the advantages of BDS South Africa is that we have a full-time office, we have a full-time organization, and we have a mechanism that can run campaigns right through to the logical end. And so we're not going to be bogged down by paperwork. We're not going to be bogged down by court cases. We're going to fight them. We're going to stand up, and we're going to be refused to be muzzled by the Israeli lobby in this country.
Mohammed, you mentioned running campaigns through to their logical end, and I would maybe like to change that to their logical victory. For indeed, at the end of every campaign, it is the victory that a certain company has either changed their stance or they've just went bankrupt. This takes lots of effort, lots of time, and strain on the individual and the people running BDS. How big is BDS? And share with us from behind the scenes what it takes to run some of these campaigns.
It takes 25 hours a day. Well, we have an office of 11 staff members up in Johannesburg. We do desperately need to open up offices in other parts of the country in order for us to have a national footprint. We get our resources, or we get funding from members of the community, people that make pledges, people that make monthly donations, people that make once-off donations. But all of our money comes from the ordinary person on the street that identifies with the struggle, that sees the victories, that sees the achievements of this campaign. But it's also a very exciting and motivating place to be. So whilst the Israeli lobby may have the unlimited resources We, on the other hand, have in many ways truth and justice on our side. And I think that this is motivating, and it keeps the team together. It keeps us in moving forward with our campaign and our work.
Well, truth, justice, and prayer are maybe three of the ingredients that keep BDS South Africa running. But living in the world we live in a world of means and material means in particular, this is what would fuel the campaign. So what can viewers of ITV look forward to from the side of BDS?
Well, we look forward to holding Woolworths accountable. We look forward also to seeing government taking increasingly tougher positions and adopting tougher policies on Israel. And beyond that, we do also, in the very immediate future, we will be having what is probably going to be one of the largest protests to take place in South African history since democracy. This is going to be a sheer volume of the sheer volume of people coming out onto the streets on Saturday, the 9th of August, to protest against the Israeli killings that are currently taking place in the Gaza Strip, is something that South Africans would not have seen before. To date, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've seen over 40 or 45 protest actions across the country, from Nelspruit to Newcastle, Ladysmith to PE, to Cape Town to Durban, and various other places, mobilizing support for the Palestinian struggle and also demanding tough action from the South African government. On the other hand, you have the Israeli lobby that puts together a pathetic rally in which you have racial profiling and other sorts of measures.
Mohammed, many of viewers of ITV would like to be part of BDS. And what's the opportunity that BDS presents to them to be a part of this campaign?
Well, beyond becoming an activist and assisting in campaigns, we really are urging members of the community to assist us financially. Our community does have the financial muscle for us to give the Israeli lobby and to give the Israeli government a run for their money. In 2012, in a news article in Israel's mainstream Haaretz newspaper, BDS South Africa was said to have outwitted and outplayed the Israeli lobby. Assist us financially so that we can continue to outwit, outplay, and ultimately defeat the Israeli lobby in this country and bring down Israeli apartheid.
Well, Friday evening, Friday the 8th of August, from 8 up until late, BDS South Africa will be hosting a live pledge line on ITV, channel 347 DSTV. Please tune in and pledge your support for BDS South Africa so that this campaign can go beyond just a month or a year and can be a sustained campaign where eventually the objectives of BDS South Africa and BDS as a global movement may be achieved and celebrated by one and all of the conscious, justice-loving, justice-serving, peace-loving people of the world. With that, we say Jazakumullah khairan to Muhammad, and we hope inshallah that you'll tune in Friday the 8th of August, 8 till late on ITV. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما. 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 صلوا عليه